It is Thursday, May 2nd, 2024, and you're watching the MMA Eco live podcast. I'm your host, as usual, Chris Presnell, owner of MMA Ecosystem, reporting to you on Asian MMA. This is week like 53 of the podcast. I guess that makes a year's worth of podcasts, either whatever, this week, last week, whatever. But crazy that we've got a year's worth of podcast in the book. So appreciate your support. If you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, like the video. Really appreciate that. And hopefully this next hour or so will be worth your while. I'm excited to get into these topics and eventually take your questions. Basically I'm 3 topics and a little bit slower of a news week for Asian MMA as a whole. We've got a UFC pay-per-view this weekend, but very little press given to it. I think overall this UFC 301 card will be really exciting and probably your money's worth in time. But in terms of widespread intrigue, there's not much for it. And I mean, we just had UFC 300 a few weeks ago, so I think there's still a lot of buzz around from the community around that still. So we'll see. I think it should be a good show, but otherwise there's a couple of Asian MMA shows going on this weekend and looking forward to those. So basically, let me touch on this one real quick. Well, let's actually go backwards before we go forward. So last Saturday in Las Vegas, we had Liang Na and Mahashate fighting at the UFC event at the Apex. So Mahashate, pretty solid performance, won a split decision ultimately against Gabriel Benitez. As always, really entertaining fight. Congrats to him. What I really want to talk about is Liang Na. So Liang Na is a fighter that has pretty much trained in China her whole career. She trains at a gym in Harbin, which is in far northeast China, major city, probably like almost like maybe the far most north big city in China, and trains at a gym called Qiulun MMA. She, a couple years ago, was a UFC Academy athlete. I think has trained off and on at the PI, but mostly has stayed at the UFC or at her home gym, Qiulun MMA. She gets signed to the UFC in 2021, debuts at that UFC pay-per-view in Florida alongside a couple other Chinese fighters. And she's now 0-4 in the UFC. 4 straight losses by finish. And most recently gets choked out by Ivana Petrovic at the Apex. And at this point, I think it's inevitable, and I think we're pretty much all in agreement that maybe her time in the UFC should end and that she should continue her career more on the regional scene. And, you know, I think when you look at all the other Chinese prospects, a lot of them have had wins, losses, sometimes kind of alternating, but she has had a much less successful run in the UFC. And I think the reason why she got even as many chances as she did is because of the fast and furious nature of her fights. They're always exciting, always. She's very high offense, low defense. And because of that, often makes for really exciting fights. Not a lot of Chinese women on the scene as well. And so I think the UFC was wanting to give her every possible opportunity to shine. But ultimately, it did not go her way, and she's now losing to people at the bottom of the division. She kind of hailed herself as like a Ronda Rousey of China, and without the championship aspirations, the decorated judo background, mainly just because I think that comparison fit in a way just because of her intensity towards getting the fight to the mat, going for the armbar. She loves the armbar finish and had a lot of success on the Chinese regional scene. But, if you look at all the other Chinese fighters, one thing is in common, and she does not fit this stat. Every single other Chinese fighter in their career the UFC career, has left China to go train somewhere else, whether that be in Thailand, whether that be in the US. All of them have gone out and kind of rooted themselves in gyms around the world. Meanwhile, Liang Na has stayed in China for the entirety of her career, with maybe the exception of a couple short trips outside to train. But for the most part, even going into this event last Saturday, her cornerman was Zhang Zhifa, who's the JCK or former JCK flyweight champion and one of the top guys out of Longyun MMA. She said that she worked really closely with Zhang Zhifa throughout this whole camp. That kind of closeness with one coach who really knows her well, it was not something she's always had. So my question is China at a place in their development as a whole in MMA to where to basically create homegrown stars that can grow up on the Chinese regional scene, stay in China to train, and make it in the UFC? Not without a couple losses, sure, but are they good enough to where you can stay at a gym in China your whole career? The closest comparison that we have to this is probably even just Zhang Weili having the same coaches that she's had for pretty much her whole MMA career, at least like the Tsai Shui Jun kind of guys, the guys at the top. A couple people have come in and out, but you know what I mean. She's still very closely associated with Black Tiger MMA. But what has she done? She's traveled all over the place and gotten a lot of different input from different people. That was something I wish Liang Na would have done, because I think that if you watch her game, it seems like she, and I really thought that we'd see something a little bit different. I listened to an interview, I think it was with Migu, where she had said that she hoped to have a little bit more patient game. And so I didn't really see that a whole lot. It seemed like she kind of got drawn into, again, that kind of high offense, low defense style, and ended up making a lot of mistakes, kind of gassing out a little bit. And I wonder if maybe she wouldn't have had these problems. Those could have been addressed really quickly if she would have gone to train elsewhere, even if just kicking it at the Shanghai PI for a long time, being able to work there. A fighter is definitely entitled to be able to train wherever they want to, and stay loyal to their, the people that help them get to the position that they're in. I think that is a really admirable thing, that kind of loyalty, but the kind of brutal honesty that comes with being able to get some different input into your style and what you have, I think is really valuable. So, for her at this point, what I would love to see from her is, one, stay connected to your gym, train there in the off season, but during fight camps, go find somewhere else to train. Or maybe even take a whole year, even off season, on season, at least a whole year, to just go train somewhere else, live somewhere else, get some different input. So I think that would be really helpful. And I'd love to see her not only fight maybe on the Chinese regional scene. The thing about that is that she fights at strawweight, sometimes at flyweight, or her last fight was at flyweight. And there's just not a lot for you if you're going to fight in China as a woman fighting at flyweight. So I would love to see her fight, maybe at one of these shows in Thailand, maybe UAE Warriors. I think there's a lot more opportunities there once you go international. But she still has a lot of time. I think that there's a couple things there that you can really build a game around, but there's just so many liabilities that she has failed to close that, I think have really cost her. As far as can you train consistently at a gym in China and stay at the top? I don't know that we're there just quite yet. I mean, your top gyms in China are your Umbo Fight, which there's been a lot of fighters that have stayed there and competed at pretty high levels. You look at Tai Laka, he's gone to Road to UFC, he's gone to NIZA, and in these international promotions, and he stayed at Umbo Fight. Trained a little bit at the PI, but he's doing pretty well for himself. So you think about Umbo Fight, you think about Longyun has fighters that have fought internationally, but Liang Na is the only one that's gone kind of above that. So yeah, we'll see. I don't know that Chinese MMA. I think that was what one takeaway I took from that. And gosh, there are so many talented coaches, gyms. China Top Team, Yun Bo. And here's another guy that's in Guangzhou in the south of China, and he's got a fighter, Feng Xiaosan, who's in Road to UFC. So, and he's been along her side her whole career. She's only 22 years old, but I'm curious. That's another thing I'm watching is like she's very loyal to that coach, to his gym, and I'm curious to see how she's going to do in Road to UFC. So, unfolding, it's definitely at a better place than it used to be. There's a lot more experience. I think what you're seeing now, back in the day, it was kind of just like specialists who were coaches in China. But now what you're seeing is you're starting to see the first generation of pretty solid like Chinese veterans that are being established as coaches. Yun Bo used to be he's one of the guys that built Chinese MMA. Also, Buhuo Yoga, who's still a champion with JCK. He's the head coach at E-Fight in Sichuan province. I don't know exactly where. I know they moved their gym from Chongqing somewhere to Sichuan province, but he's raising up a lot of really good E-fighters. So it's cool to see a lot of those kind of fighters. Eventually, what I'm wondering is if you'll see more UFC fighters, your Song Yedongs, your Li Jingliangs, once they're retired, coming back and setting up their own gyms or being coaches. Another guy he's fighting tomorrow. Tough China winner. I'm blanking on his name. He's got a gym in Foshan. Zhang Li Peng, that's right. Ning Guangyo also has his own gym. So it'll get there. It's getting better, but still a work in progress. All right, let's talk about RIZIN a little bit. I don't often cover RIZIN a whole lot, but I wanted to check out this latest show and kind of see, especially they have this Korea versus Japan thing going on. And overall, an interesting show. I'm going to go ahead and pull up the results from that so you can see that. You had Chihiro Suzuki defending his featherweight title against Masanori Kanehara. You had Jintaro Ushiku kind of getting upset by Shinobu Ota. And then you had these three Koreans, Kim Soo-chol, Lee Jung-hyun, and Yong fighting Taichi Nakajima, Makoto Shinru Takahashi, and Kazuma Kuromoto, respectively. Yoshiki Nakahara, who's a pretty good prospect, he lost his fight. Sora Yamamoto also lost. Ryo Takagi opened the card with a really nice knockout. I'm going to look at the three Korean guys and then the main event. So the fight between Yang Ji-yong and Kazuma Kuromoto, I think what I've heard is, so Yang Ji-yong, a guy that I've been really high on, he only had one loss before this fight. He loses a split decision. And I watched, I wasn't able to watch the whole fight. I watched most of it. He opened up a cut on Kuromoto's eyebrow that was really nasty, swelled up really big. And from what I heard from him speaking with a reporter is he was a little bit thrown off by the scoring system. He said he's used to like more of a round by round scoring, and this fight was scored as a whole. So he said that kind of threw him off a little bit, but ultimately, I don't think it's too much of a setback for Yang Ji-yong. I do like the idea of Korean fighters in RIZIN. I think that a lot of Koreans have really exciting styles. I think they're good enough for the top guys in RIZIN, and with them being so close geographically, there's just a lot that makes sense about more Koreans going to RIZIN. And I heard that Nobuyuki Sakakibara even said that they were thinking about doing an event in Seoul. So that makes total sense to me. I mean, for crying out loud, they did an event in Azerbaijan. So why not do an event in South Korea? I think that's a perfect, like probably the number one place if you're going to go outside of Japan for RIZIN to go. So I like that idea a lot. This second fight, I kind of hated this fight. I really didn't like the matchmaking here. Lee Jung-hyun is quite a bit younger than Makoto Shinryu Takahashi, and I feel like these are two. I don't even know if Takahashi, you can call him a prospect anymore, because he's kind of proven that like he's one of the top Japanese guys. He's got a 17-2-1 record. He's almost kind of graduated from prospect status to like, I don't know, what do you call it, contender. But Lee Jung-hyun, he is like firmly in the prospect status, but still really young. He's only 21 years old. And I felt like these are two guys that are in very separate tiers of MMA. And just because they're the same weight, because Lee Jung-hyun, yeah, he is one of the top flyweights out of Korea, but as soon as this fight was made, I knew it was going to be a wash for Shinryu. So I was kind of bummed that the fight got made. It went pretty much exactly how I thought it would. Shinryu taking him down, choking him out with an arm triangle choke. I think Lee Jung-hyun, it's a good time to go back to the Korean MMA scene, fight for some of those guys, Black Combat, Double GFC, all that. So AFC, Road, whatever. I think he should go back there. Kim Soo-chul against Naichi Nakajima. Really cool knockout. Kim gets it 5 seconds into the second round, or I should say 6 seconds. Knocks him out with a left hook. Really nice stuff from Kim Soo-chul. One of the most entertaining guys out there. Always puts on great fights. And then the main event, you've got Chihiro Suzuki against Masanori Kanehara. I don't love Kanehara, he earned this title shot. And so I feel like the fight in a way kind of needed to happen, because in a very meritocratic way, but I still kind of had a feeling like that Suzuki was going to blow through him, and he kind of did. Caught him, just kind of hit this like gear in the first round where he just put this insane, intense pressure on Kanehara, and Kanehara just couldn't answer fast enough, couldn't fire back fast enough, and just got clipped over and over, and eventually drops down. And Suzuki finishes him with punches on the ground. So a pretty like rote routine win for Suzuki. I mean, I would be surprised if there are many people picking Kanehara before this fight, but one of those fights that just kind of needs to happen. Suzuki, I think he's one of the top guys, but I feel like I still have a few question marks about him before I'm ready to be like, yeah, this guy's sensational. He's a world beater, could beat a UFC champion, all that kind of stuff. So there you have it. There's RIZIN 46. And then I'm going to transition. I'm going to share the I'm going to look a little bit at the calendar coming up this weekend, because looking at this weekend, there is a lot of, wouldn't you know it? Well, first of all, look at this one event. This one event is not bad. There's some kind of funky stuff going on with the main event with the weight, all that stuff, but there's some pretty decent MMA fights that I'm looking forward to. Noel Grandjean against Chihiro Sawada. I like that fight a lot. And then kind of the theme of the weekend that I'm seeing is Chinese flyweights. There's a lot of really good Chinese flyweights that are in action. Yong is one of the top rising fighters in one championship right now. He's fighting Lise McLaren, which I spelled that wrong. I'll fix that later. But Yong is, I don't really know what his ceiling is, but he's had some really good knockouts recently. And yeah, he could be fighting for a title shot in this fight. Although I still feel like for one champion, I have what is going on with their flyweight division? What is going on? Demetrius Johnson, is he retired? Is he not? Kairat Akhmatov fails a drug test, but he's the clear number one contender, in my opinion. The first flyweight title fight that should be booked, or the next one that should be booked, is absolutely Mighty Mouse versus Kairat Akhmatov. If Demetrius Johnson is out, then I would say Akhmatov versus whoever wins this fight. If Akhmatov still can't make it, then you got another situation on your hands. But interesting situation there. You see, you've also got Zhongli Peng fighting Maurice Obevi. Looking forward to that. Scrolling down here, a couple more Chinese flyweights. You've got Nigedan, a Tibetan guy who trains out of Unbo Fight. He's fighting Zhou Qiyong in the JCK main event this weekend. I think this is really good matchmaking. Both guys are on a nice little run there. Right when I was really intensely starting to follow Chinese MMA a couple years ago, Nigedan was one of the first guys that I was like, okay, he's kind of right on that bubble, and maybe lost, like, I think he hasn't always been very active. I think he's lost one fight in there, but overall looked pretty good. And Zhou Qiyong is also on a win streak as well, some TKO finishes. So I think that's a good fight. And the co-main, I mean, this could easily be the main event as well. Qiulun coming back to fight Jahar Bieka-Noir. I like this fight a lot. I'm tempted to say this is a little bit too much too soon for Jahar. Qiulun is way, way, way more experienced than Jahar. Jahar is still kind of earlier in it. I put him in the prospect category, but he is still like kind of at the beginning of that phase. So good wrestler, developing striking game. Qiulun a little bit more developed in all areas, but sometimes can kind of freeze up, get behind on the scorecards, not really like fight super aggressively. So I think this is a good fight to see where both guys are at. If Jahar can beat Qiulun, then it's time to raise his stock several levels. If Qiulun can beat Jahar, then I think like that's kind of like a stamp of approval of like, okay, Qiulun, we can't forget about him just yet. He's stumbled and fallen a lot of times the last couple of years, but beating a guy like Jahar, who's a good wrestler, like that's a really good sign for his career, and that puts him pretty close to the top for like a title shot. The JCK flyweight title was just announced, and weirdly enough, it's taking place at Ailash Pride FC 97, which happens sometime in May. That's going to be between Buho Yoga, the champion, and Zheng Boqie, who is the #1 contender. So I wouldn't be, I mean, I feel like the next contender at flyweight in JCK is going to be one of these four guys right here. Maybe they will have the winners fight each other after this. Who knows? They have their own ranking system there, which I think is really nice. They've got enough fighters to be able to pull that off. But interesting fight there. Other than that, this weekend, you've got Gladiator and then another Chinese flyweight, or I guess I should say he's not a flyweight, he's a bantamweight, but Agulali, he's fighting Ivan Parshikov, one championship veteran, in the main event of Chengdu Fight Night 30 on this Sunday. Love this fight for Agulali. They as in whoever arranges fights. This is his second straight fight with Chengdu Fight Night, but I love that he's getting out of China. I love that he's fighting Russian guys. He fought a Russian guy in his last fight, won fairly easily there. Ivan Parshikov had some good moments in one championship fighting for One Friday Fights, but I think he lost maybe 2 in a row. And those fights are, it's short commitments for all those fights. So I don't know if they just didn't offer him another fight or if he walked, but Ivan Parshikov I think he trains out of Phuket Top Team. So he's been in Thailand for a while. But I think this is a great fight. I love this fight for Agulali to see if he can prove himself. Look also on this card. I mean, this is Chengdu Fight Night is always putting out great cards, really over delivers for a regional Indonesian MMA card. They've got another guy, Colton Kielbasa, against Australian veteran Ryan Robertson. That's a good fight. Yukian Dembe, maybe between him and Rabindra Dant, the two top guys out of Nepal. Really looking forward to that. And then you've got a lot of Indonesian guys on this card too. So Rinaldi Mansa, he's an atomweight guy. I think he's undefeated. 5-0, 6-0, something like that. Excuse me. So a lot of goods going down this weekend. Definitely will be paying attention to the Chinese guys. So, yeah, let's get into your questions and we'll see where this takes us. Thoughts on Ryan Garcia retroactive positive test? Why are people going crazy over this when in the USADA era we saw this all the time? I don't follow boxing enough to know how often this happens. I think MMA fans, well, I can understand why people are going nuts. One, I don't know if this happens as much as boxing as it does in MMA. Two, the magnitude of that fight. That was a really, really big fight. That was one of the fights that in the boxing world started to extend past the typical combat sports fan over into like the greater sports world. And I think because of the unstable nature, the unstable posture, I guess, that Ryan Garcia was presenting to us, it got even more interest gathered. So people, I think, are wondering how that storyline ties into everything else we saw from Ryan Garcia. I don't have like the expertise. I didn't really follow a lot of those stories. I just kind of saw them as headlines as I kind of scraped through my timelines. So I'm really just going off that. I really can't comment a whole lot extensively, but I can understand why people are like really shocked because the story was that Ryan Garcia, despite all these red flags that he was giving us leading up to the fight, was still able to have a great performance against Devin Haney. And then now a lot of that is coming back up with the drug test failure. So, however, like, I mean, I always have to remind people, like, he got marked for that, but that doesn't mean that that's not necessarily the same as knowingly taking steroids. So, I think, once you investigate it, figure out where it came from, all of that, then that's another thing. So I'm cautious to call someone like a cheater or like knowingly. We can create so many narratives in our minds of what happened, of him like taking steroids to compensate for other things and to try to get an advantage. But I think we have to be careful about those narratives. So in that sense, I can see like, maybe we need to calm down, but I can see, because the thing is that it changes the results of the fight. Like it literally takes away the win. So, I can see that. It's very just continues the series of bizarre headlines from that fight. Did I believe that Weili's fans would be respectful to Qiulun after the fight? Yeah, I absolutely did. I didn't see anything from Yong that would merit any kind of disrespect. Been pretty vile the way fans and media alike are treating Weili right now. I haven't seen anything about that. According to them, she's the most vulnerable champion. Her striking is the worst. Suarez runs through. Huh. Interesting. I have not seen any of that. And you know me, I don't really get my hands in like Reddit or like a lot of like chat groups, but I haven't seen much either way, honestly, to be honest. Did I enjoy the last RIZIN card? Yeah, I did. I did. Yeah. Not all the fights, I would say, were like, it wasn't my favorite RIZIN card, but I enjoyed it. There's enough interesting fights, and honestly, yeah, I feel like the next one. What did they announce for the next one? It was like just yesterday or something for the June 9th show. They announced, so you already had Kyoji Horiguchi versus Sergio Pettis rematch. Love that fight. Tetsuya Seki versus Karshi Godoutbek. Kleber Koike Earps against Juan Archuleta. I'm indifferent to that. Spike, these are some of the good ones. Spike Carlisle against Kim Kyung Pyo. Love that fight. That should be a really exciting fight. Kim applied for Road to UFC, but I'm guessing didn't get it just because there weren't enough lightweight spots. I have no idea why they didn't choose him instead of Kiwon Bean. Don't know if something else came up we don't know about, but I feel like Red Horse should have been, if you're going to have a non-tournament fight, Red Horse should be the first guy that you put in there. So I don't know. Patrick Show-Asami against Kazuki Tokudome. Mikio Ueda, who is coming off a big win over the other heavyweight guy, Tsuyoshi Sudario, against Przemysław Kowalczyk. So I think, I mean, RIZIN just puts on it's hit or miss for me. Like they'll put on fights that I'm like, we all know how this is gonna go. Like Seika Izawa against Mayu Yamamoto. I'm just like, I don't need this. Like this just feels like filler. And so the matchmaking can be hit or miss for me. And it was a little bit with that last card, but overall, yeah, I really did enjoy it. So you say, I think Liang Na should have been cut 3 fights ago, but in Chinese MMA, there's a lot of people saying that it's her coach's fault. She hasn't developed. It's both her responsibility to get better herself and more tactically. Maybe I'm harsh, but that's the truth. Her style is all wrong and has a bad gas tank. Yeah, I mean, I think I kind of echoed some of that sentiment with you. I think she does have a lot of ability. It's like, I think that her coaches did the best that they could. She did the best that she could, but I think just like she just needs second opinions. You got to have second opinions. You got to have people that push you in different ways. I just don't know if her coaches have like what's needed to fill in what's there to tighten up her striking, to allow her to set up her takedowns a little bit better, to give her a better base on the ground, to be able to develop a strength and conditioning program that's going to be able to see her through the whole 15 minutes of the fight. I don't know if they have those resources, that knowledge, whatever. It seems kind of like unfathomable to me that they don't recognize these big gaps. So I don't know what the story is there. I'm always careful to criticize coaches because I'm not there at the gym. I don't know what their conversations are like with their fighters, what their methods are like. So I always want to reserve judgment. It's like you always have to look at it as like they got this fighter to that point, to the UFC level. And so there's definitely recognition worthy. That's worth recognizing. But once you get to that UFC level, you can't, you can't just, unless you're Ronda Rousey in 2014, you can't just rely on I'm going to get the fight to the ground right away and submit with an arm bar. Like you can't hang your hat on that. So, I don't know what happens next. I think that she needs to have a lot of brutal honesty with herself about what needs to happen next in her career. And if she wants to eventually make it back to the top level, what needs to happen to get there. So yeah, I'll be watching. You know, I feel like she's also a fighter that kind of stays out of the limelight too, which is interesting, but yeah, very interesting. Is Mahashate a good fighter, or will he be middle of the pack? You know, how old is this guy? He is a prelim level. Like he is definitely UFC level. It's not like he just gets lucky with these wins. He is 2-2 in the UFC. He has a KO win over Steve Garcia, a split decision win over Gabriel Benitez, and has lost to Rafa Garcia and Vyacheslav Borshev. All of those fights have been really like entertaining, fun fights. Of course, that doesn't really have so much to do with his skill, just his ability to entertain, push a certain pace, take certain kinds of risks. But I think that he is UFC level. And I think that I don't see from him the level of like getting like he's going to be a prelim fighter for a while. I think he's 24 years old. He's trained at Killcliff FC. Now he's at Fight Ready in Arizona, which is a great gym. And yeah, I'm still torn on him. It seems like he has gotten better since he made his UFC debut, but still some like defensive liabilities on the feet. He gets hit a lot. And I mean, if I'm the UFC, yeah, just keep giving him these kind of like lower level prelim fights. Gabriel Benitez, where Steve Garcia has really taken off, and he's done really well for himself recently. But these kind of fights, I think, yeah, just let him develop. So I think he could be a really big star someday. He's got, he's got the connections to Kazakhstan, and then is from China. Really exciting style. So I think the UFC would be wise to bring him along slowly. I think if he stays at Fight Ready for a while, I think eventually he'll get out of the prelim status. But I think he's still, I still in my mind kind of put him lower on the, he's lightweight, right? Yeah. Lower on the lightweight, whatever, roster lineup, whatever. Do you think nobody ever gives credit to Weili's coaching staff or team for coming up with good game plans? I don't know what you mean by no one gives them credit. Even when the fight she underperforms. I mean, I don't really know what you mean by like no one gives them credit. I guess you're talking about in the MMA media. It seems like they're pretty well celebrated among Chinese fans who know them. I think that part of the reason why they're not really celebrated is one, because like you have to realize like I think a lot of the fan perception with Weili and maybe fan disconnection from her is her choice not to do media. Her coaches don't really do media. And so there is kind of an isolation that she has from the rest of the MMA community, especially with some of her top coaches, both currently and historically, not speaking English. It's a little bit harder. They don't really coach other fighters. So they have been pretty isolated in a bubble. I have seen people give them credit for sure. It's just that they are pretty unfamiliar for the most part to the rest of the MMA world. So I think if that were to change, maybe you would see more, it's like Eddie Cha. People give him a lot of credit for fighters that he is able to develop. He's in the US, he speaks English, he coaches a lot of fighters. Also the other guy from Syndicate, John Wood, like you see him around a lot. See him on a lot of podcasts. Maybe if there was a stronger connection, then maybe you'd see more of that credit. But I'd like to see more of it. That's for sure. But I think that's mostly why, if that's how you feel. Most of Weili's best fans have started to hate Qiulun because the way Qiulun has started to get the rub. I don't know why you would dislike someone for getting a rub. Yeah, I mean, again, like going back to last week, Jan overperformed what we expected. I don't really see her getting like a huge rub either. But yeah, I just don't understand why you would be upset at someone if they overperformed and because of that they're respected. Again, I don't understand what the controversy behind giving a fighter respect for showing up and fighting their hardest is. I don't feel like that's all that controversial. Said you read and saved Ghost scouting report before it got taken down by copyright. He said there are a lot of things they worked on and didn't capitalize in that fight. Yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly what they worked on, so it's hard for me to totally agree with that. Or or like to agree or disagree. Scouting report was super extensive and detailed, but all the looks that he said would show up did. Weili only exploited 50% of what they worked on. I mean, that's great. The thing is like you have to, for a fighter, you can have all of the like best coaching, best game planning, the most detailed analysis at your fingertips, but none of it matters if you're not able to deploy all of it. Like, I mean, that's great. That's really awesome that they have that. But like, what makes a fighter great is if they're able to. I'm not saying you're not great. This is the only way you're a great fighter. But like, it only matters. Like that stuff just kind of living around in your headspace, among your team, in the gym, none of that matters. All that matters is what shows up on fight night in the UFC cage. She still did like a lot of great things well, was able to deploy a lot of things, but yeah, that's how I feel about that. Did you see Tapology purposefully shame fighters who make fraudulent records? Are you going to do that one day if you see a Chinese MMA fighter submit fraudulence? Yup, totally. I don't care who it is. And Tapology's been doing it for years and years. What they do, let me show you. Let me find an example. Oh, this guy that we love so much at Tapology. Pretty sure he has okay, yeah. Check this guy out. I think I've brought this guy up before, but this just so you can see the message. So this is Alisson Barbosa. Fighter has been found by Tapology to have engaged in activity which does not conform to combat sport standards. Fighter or their management has definitively and knowingly provided false or misleading information in an effort to remove losses or otherwise manipulate their record. So some public shaming going on. The message is that we want clean records. We want honest, accurate records. And just like some people argue that PEDs ruin the integrity of the sport, I would almost argue like it's more like what threatens the integrity of the sport more is fighting fights that are not fair, not as in mismatches, but like where fighters are not fighting to their best, where fighters or promoters or managers are providing false information, creating aliases. That helps nobody. That literally helps nobody. It helped what's his face, that Ukrainian guy, at least get into the UFC, but for what? I mean, he's not making money now. I don't know that he's fighting anymore. I don't know that anyone would want him on their show. So what did that get him? You know? So it's a big deal. And I think Tapology really wants fighters to be aware of like, hey, if you do this, like this is going to be a black mark on your whole career. So don't do it. And if I ever saw like a Chinese fighter doing that, I would do the same thing. I mean, if I didn't mark that and then someone else found out about it, then that would come back on me. And then that's a black mark on me. So yeah, absolutely. Doesn't matter what country you're from. Doesn't matter how cool you are, how well beloved you are. You deserve this black spot if you're intentionally falsifying records to try to get an advantage. Totally. All right, see if I get this reference. If we listen to each other's heart, we'll find we're never too far apart. And maybe love is the reason why, for the first time ever, we're seeing each other eye to eye. Name of song, Yong. Sometimes it's so hard to recognize a song when you don't know the tune, you know? I don't. I'm sorry. I don't know the song. What do I think of Miktybek Oralbai being made fun of his appearance and looking like he has Down syndrome? Yeah, it's pretty brutal. We shouldn't. I don't get people. You said appropriate, offensive, fair game because he's a public figure on a big platform. I don't think that we should ever make fun of people with Down syndrome, things that they can't control. I think in terms of like making fun of a fighter's appearance, if the fighter seems like they're kind of going along with it and enjoying it, I think that that's okay. But I also just don't really understand. I don't think that it's fair to make fun of someone's appearance. You have like, I think there's pretty harmless examples of that. Like thinking about Gregory Rodriguez always being compared to Barack Obama. I feel like that's pretty harmless. There's no like insult in that. I don't think. And then the other one, like Bogdan Guskov being compared to Anthony Smith. Again, like there's no insult with that. But when you're saying someone looks like someone who has a mental and physical disability, then I think that that crosses the line. I don't really even care to like make fun of people for their appearance. I mean, you know, like I just don't get the point. Making fun of someone for something they couldn't choose. You know, I don't get it. It's over the line. Yeah, as I know, Francis Ngannou's child passed away a few days ago. Really, really sucks. Did you see the really offensive joke that a large MMA Twitter account posted? I did not. My take on that is if you have any edgy humor just for getting engagement, is that part of the problem? Why the MMA community is toxic, do you agree? People saying free speech need to understand. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the people that are the biggest advocates for free speech are oftentimes some of the biggest assholes you'll ever meet. You know, like like a lot of times people want to play the free speech card just as an excuse to be a total jerk to everybody and not have to pay the consequences. I mean, let's just call it what it is, right? People want to be able to, and those people are usually the most sensitive people. As soon as you start criticizing them, then they get really, really upset really quickly. I think you all, I don't think I really have to explain that further for you all to know what I'm talking about with the MMA community. Honestly, like if you're posting something like that for an MMA media account, you should get fired. I don't even know what that was like. If it was just someone like me that has their own page, or if it was something bigger, I didn't see it. Again, I keep my following pretty narrow. But yeah, I mean, you post that, you're probably like knowing that you're going to get reamed for it, but you also know that a lot of people in the MMA community will either engage with it or think it's funny. So it's unfortunate. But yeah, totally agree with you. I don't know if you heard, there's a controversy regarding Road FC. You said Road FC live MMA actually report that the referee kind of assists the Korean fighter fight against the Indian fighter Punyajit Lee. Ooh, I'll have to look into that. Yeah, I will look into that because that is worth following up. I'm not going to say, I don't know anything about that, so I don't want to imply that that's what happened. But I'm writing down Road FC referee controversy. That is very interesting. Let's say you're right. The fight between Zhang versus Yan should not have been stopped, even though these people that you listed respectfully said that it should have been. How do I think people are going to remember that fight? I don't know. I mean, everyone's going to remember it differently. The first thing that comes to mind when I remember that fight is that it was an awesome fight. Like, it was another chapter. I feel like Yan and Zhang have both had several really entertaining performances in the UFC. And the first thing I think of when I hear Zhang versus Yan was what a crazy fight that was. Entertaining fight. that added a big, really important chapter to both fighters' careers. And I remember just like the pendulum swinging back and forth, basically. I'm not saying equally, but that's how I remember the fight. Everyone's going to remember that fight differently. There was some people I heard, like maybe it was Dana White, that said after the Gaethje versus Holloway fight at UFC 300, the whole arena was like exhausted by the time Yong versus Yong started. So maybe it wasn't as like well received as it normally would have been. So for a lot of people, they might have not really thought much about the fight just because of what had just happened with Gaethje and Holloway. So, everyone has a different perspective on it, I think. I mean, yeah, you're asking a lot of questions about media perception, double standard, and honestly, I think I've touched on these a lot. So I appreciate your thoughts, but I'm gonna skip over those just for now, because I don't want this chat to just center on Weili, UFC 300, all that stuff. So I appreciate that, but I'm going to cap off those questions for today. Yeah, let's see what else we got. Going to skip over that question. Synchro Wing, you're asking again about submitting false, misleading information on Tapology. Exactly. I covered that. Hard to vet these fraudulent records. I've touched on kind of our process with that, and sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. I think the thing is there's certain regions around the world that seem to just produce a higher quantity of these kinds of fraudulent fights. And so, at least for now, from some of these countries, and some of them you might expect, some of them would surprise you. And so we just kind of have our, have our alarm bells raised a little bit more whenever we see we have fights coming in for these promotions. Some, not everyone, talking about India, Matrix Fight Night has been it's not like we're scrutinizing them to see if fights are legit, but especially I think if the if the fight's happening in a parking lot somewhere in Afghanistan or India, then yeah, we're gonna scrutinize it a little bit more. But someone just brought up Road FC and the referee there, so I mean, you really have to be watching at all times. But I think when there's just kind of regions that we know, like, hey, like, not saying don't put in the fights, they don't deserve to go in, but just kind of have an extra bit of attention to these promotions for sure. The song is from a Goofy movie. Oh my gosh. Oh, I was told, no. I watched that movie many times at friends' houses. I was born in 1990, so all the a lot of those 90s references I get. I just haven't watched that in forever, and so I don't even really remember the song. But no, I watched that a lot as a kid for sure. Adding to question about edgy humor. Yeah, Jack Slack. The question, I think different people would have different. The question is that you follow Jack Slack, who does edgy humor sometimes, but he never crosses the line like that parody account did. I don't want to name it, but I can email it. What was So rude. Yeah, if you want to. I think I've also talked about this before, and with all the respect to the technical work that Slack does, everyone has a different line. Talk about crossing the line. People have different lines. I have my own line, and I think my line is that I don't want to get in social media fights with people. I probably have a much, I don't know what the metaphor is, closer line than a lot of people do. I just like don't want anything that I do to ever be construed as bullying. I don't want to give the energy to arguing with people online. Like really none of it. And sometimes I'll get passionate about things even on this podcast. But I feel like you can't talk about how toxic MMA culture is if you're not willing to be part of the solution. Just my opinion. Like if you can't speak the language, who do you look up the fights? How do you look up the fights of those fighters? Oh, good question. Because yeah, I do a lot of research and I do tape study of fighters from a lot of different countries. Fortunately, for the most part, YouTube has you covered. And even if I've got a video coming out early tomorrow morning in the US on the Road to UFC Flyweights. Fighters of a lot of different countries there. So India, Philippines, Japan, China, Korea. Fortunately, most of those are on YouTube, like Matrix Fight Night puts their fights on YouTube, a couple weeks after the fact. Honestly, probably the hardest one is Japan, because, a lot of them, they use English, Ruel Pañales, Filipino guy. You can search his name, his fights will come up. Or a lot of them will, not all of them. But a lot of these fighters, you can type their name in English, but it's the fighters that have names in different scripts, and really the fan base, like Road FC, there's a big Korean fan base. So a lot of their stuff is in Korean, especially Japanese MMA. A lot of their stuff is in Japanese, not English. So honestly, I don't speak a lick of Japanese, but it's as easy as going to Toki Matsui's Tapology page. And another thing I love about Tapology is that for not everyone, but a lot of people, especially if they're more notable, we have their name in their original language written on their profile. So that's something I've done. I don't handle any Chinese profile on Tapology without adding their Chinese name and characters on there. So there's probably almost no Chinese profiles on there without Chinese characters, because I've been really diligent to add all of them. For Japan, I'll just go to Toki Matsui's Tapology page, copy and paste his name into YouTube, and I'll get his fights usually a lot more than I would if I just typed it in English. So that's really what you do. And then beyond that, you really don't need to know any of the language, because a lot of times I'll watch commentary on mute. So, sometimes I'll listen to commentary if it's in English to get like the fighter walkouts. And sometimes you'll just learn more things about the fighter from the commentators, where they train, where their headspace is at, their different accolades, things like that is helpful to know if you have that in English. But a lot of times I will watch the fights on mute just to be able to kind of get in the zone. But it's helpful to watch it with commentary also sometimes too, because they can point out things that you can't always recognize. It helps to build things out. So yeah, that's how I do it. And then for the Chinese fights, obviously I speak enough Chinese to be able to, I can find my way around Chinese internet just fine, even without using too much of a translator. I'll go to WeChat, I'll go to Bilibili, I'll go to different websites, I'll go to Douyin, and I can search things just fine. So not too much of a barrier there. How would I make Chinese MMA better if I could, like develop the fighters? Oh, great question. You have a couple follow-up comments. I know they have the PI, but if you had complete autonomy on how you would improve MMA fighters in China, like what would you do? Find coaches that are from the US, build another PI, make more MMA promotions, but challenge the Chinese fighters instead of inflate them. I don't mean having the fighters travel abroad, but having fighters get good training at their home country. I think eventually you will get a lot of really high level elite gyms, even to the standard of like some of the gyms that you see in Phuket, Thailand. I think eventually you may see some of those kind of gyms in China, but that will happen naturally. That's not something that I would say like, yeah, if we could just do this, this would really like create a higher level of gyms in China. I think eventually that will just happen as high level fighters retire, go back to China, start their own gyms, have the money to hire coaches, build really nice facilities, bring in different fighters to train there. I think eventually that will happen on its own. I think domestically, in terms of competition, China is doing pretty well. There's a lot of things I really like about Chinese MMA right now. I like that they're in this season of co-promotion. I don't know if it's going to always look like how it looks like right now, but I like that they are doing that because honestly, before this year, I would say the biggest problem with Chinese MMA is that they're not getting enough contact, whether coaching or competition, with people outside of China. It can get a little bit insular just competing in China, mainly because it's a lot of the same people. But it seems like that's changing, especially for the women. I mean, female Chinese MMA fighters have it really rough. That it's hard to like develop into this super prospect and only fighting and training within China. But maybe that'll change. I like what I see from JCK. It seems like they're trying to build a strawweight division. Even though a lot of those fighters are pretty like low level, making their debut, just like getting strawweight fights on the board, I think is really good for Chinese MMA. And I'm glad they're doing that. They don't need to put a belt on the line anytime soon. What I really believe in what JCK is doing. A couple things that I would change about their format, but I do think that like there is room in China to have a promotion that has champions at every weight class, where these champions can build a following and make title defenses against really good contenders. And it seems like JCK, they've switched their model and they're finally doing that. I really like that the champions are now kind of carrying the organization. And they're also co-promoting too a lot. There's a lot of good things that are going on, and a lot of times you can't just make all the changes you want to see. You have to just let them play out, because the thing that you can't rush is fighters getting good experience and good fighting experience and good training. So you can't rush that. And so it's like, even for the PI, when they launched the PI, I knew like, yeah, they're not going to be cranking out world beaters for a long time. It's going to take them like 5 to 10 years to get this to a place where they're like really have everything figured out and they can really develop fighters quickly. And they are getting there for sure. I think what I would change, it's interesting that you have kind of these two promotions in China, JCK and WLF. And WLF has been instrumental in building Chinese MMA, but I don't really know like where they fit in now. And there's so many things they do that confuse me, and I wonder like, what is this really doing for? And like it seems like it's a little bit more self-serving. Just like they don't really promote their fight cards very well. It's really unclear like who are the champions here, like what's the system here. So that I think I would change a lot with that promotion. But honestly, I don't know if China really needs more than one like staple promotion. You know, are they big enough for that? I don't know. I'll tell you the one thing that I definitely would change across the board: get rid of these freaking squash matches between experienced Chinese fighter and 0-0 Iranian fighter. Lose those. We don't need those. That's not gonna that may help entertain fans for a night that are showing up live in attendance that don't ever watch MMA. But that's doing nothing. If anything, that's like holding back Chinese MMA. So I would get rid of that right away. As far as like what could MMA gyms in China outside the PI, what could they do to really improve? I do think that bringing in some other coaches could be really useful. I mean, it's interesting. You look at the Shanghai PI, and there's a lot of Chinese staff there that do a tremendous job. But if you look at the coaching staff at the PI, it's Dean Amasinger, it's Mark Timms, Reed Rayall. He's like dieting. But it's a lot of guys from outside of China, and there are great coaches within China. But I think if and Black Tiger does this, right? They've got some coaches from outside of China there. So some of them do it, but I would like to see more coaches from outside of China being brought in. And honestly, there's probably some expats living in China that could do that. I know like Vaughn Anderson, who lives in Chongqing, an exemplary commentator for JCK. He used to fight pro. You know, I think he could be a tremendous coach in a lot of ways. You know, I don't know if Chinese coaches would be offended if I were to say that. But I think like if you really want to build like a super gym, if you want to build a gym that really becomes a destination, you know, I think a lot of people should look at Bong Tao, should look at Tiger Muay Thai and think like, how did they get to that level? They made it this international place. And I think if Chinese MMA gyms thought more of like, can we make this an international hub? And I know some of that goes into like travel. It's probably easier to travel for most people to Thailand than it is to China long term. I get that. And it also helps that Thailand is like a tropical paradise. You know, Phuket, a little bit easier to draw people there than to like a city of 12 million people. I get that, but and I know this takes money too. These are simple things, but I think that could really help a lot of Chinese MMA gyms because they're starting to get to this level of they are able to get to the UFC level, but not past. So I think, bringing in that extra expertise would be really helpful. Probably just a few more here. Been doing a lot of browsing. Hey, I appreciate that. I don't know if you all saw, and for a lot of you, you may not care. You may actually not like this, but I finally this week, I had no idea what took so long, but I got approved for ads on my website. So I threw just a couple on the main page. Now that I'm done with this video, I'm going to work things out a little bit more. But the good news about that is that allows an income stream to come from my website, which because of that income stream will allow me to put more effort. It'll be cyclical. So that is really good news. I have no idea what took it so long because I didn't change a whole lot from when I launched the website in January. But yeah. Will I ever put links to my YouTube channel on it? There is a little link in the upper right of the main page, but for there to be links to the YouTube channel. So I will tell you guys also, I have 3 interviews that I'm hoping to pull off this month. 3. I feel like I've done like 3 in the last year. Maybe not even that much, but I have 3 that I want to do in the next month. All 3 with Road to UFC fighters. And I've gotten the green light from all of those fighters, their management. So now we're just working on scheduling. So if I can get interviews, then I can write articles off those interviews. I can embed the YouTube videos and can work with that a little bit more. But my article count has been pretty low with my website, mostly because there's no financial incentive to really like be spending a lot of time writing for the website. Hopefully that'll change. How many events will one do the rest of this year? Can fighters from one go to Road to UFC, or is that impossible? Those are two types of contracts with one championship. There are the Friday Fights contracts, which, as far as I know, are one fight deals. Those fighters can come and go. They do have to let one championship know, basically matching. Basically, that for 6 months after they fight with one Friday Fights, there's a 6-month matching period, which is kind of insane to me considering they're just one fight deals. But yeah, so those fighters you'll see come and go, and that's why you see like Ivan Parshakov there. But then there's fighters that have multi-fight deals. Those are exclusive. So if you're seeing a fighter fight somewhere else that previously had a multi-fight deal, it means that either they are breaking their contract, hopefully not, or they are released from their contract. So an example of this that I saw this week, Eko Roni Saputra, who's one of their top Indonesian guys, I saw that he's scheduled to fight in an Indonesian promotion this June against Andre Chelbaev, who is a One Friday Fights guy. I'm guessing it wasn't an issue for him, but I don't know what's. I was talking with an Indonesian friend about this, like, hey, what's going on with this contract? And we're guessing that he's out of his one contract. We don't know. Don't really know what's going on there, but so they can't. Those fights are exclusive. Grappling may be a little bit different. I know it's different with UFC. You'll see fighters fight in grappling competitions, but no, those are exclusive otherwise. How many events will one do the rest of this year? So we're excluding the One Friday Fights events because those are pretty much every week. But other than that, I think they will do one, it looks like they're going to do one per month and then maybe 2 in either October or November. So I actually talked about this on last week's podcast. I even went to the One Championship website and looked through their calendar for the rest of the year. And they have one event scheduled outside of the Friday Fights every month. June is Bangkok. July is Bangkok. Those are June is 167 in Bangkok. July, One Friday Fights 23, I think. One Friday Fights in Bangkok. August, we have no idea. It's a Friday fight, or fight night. I meant to say fight night in July. August is a fight night show, location TBA. September is 168. That's in Denver, Colorado, USA. 169 is going to take place in between September and November. So we don't know about that. October, they will have a fight night show. November will be 170. That will be in Atlanta, Georgia, USA. And then December will be a fight night show as well. So hope that answered your question. You can check that out on their website as well. Right. Yeah. And Gene, yeah, that's, yeah, I gotcha. An idea would be having links to your content that specifically talk about each event on your site. Yeah, I'm working on getting my links out there a little bit more. Things will change on my website going forward. I was in a phase where I was like basically just trying to put out like just enough for Google to hopefully give me ads, but I didn't want to do a lot on my website just because there was no financial incentive to do so. I got a lot of things I want to do, and I really have to focus on things that bring in the cash. But yeah, I'll start getting my links out there more and more and generate more traffic. And then Makoto saying, yeah, Black Tiger has Filipino coaches that they hire for striking. Yep. And the original owner is a Filipino. Oh, I didn't know about that. The original owner. Very interesting. Do all the UFC PIs operate the same way? As far as I know, yeah. Like the new PI in Mexico doesn't operate like the one in Shanghai. It looks like it, yeah. Looks like they're pretty much the same. They even had their own academy recently. So as far as I know, yeah. Follow me on X. When I share links to your site, it keeps getting hidden. Do you know why? Part of that is because X is a piece of junk. The other reason is, so I know I shared a link to this podcast about an hour ago, and those links only show if you click on the post. Otherwise, it'll just be like a link. But otherwise, what I've been told to do is like, if you're wanting to talk about an article or some news and you have an article about it, make your post, say, basically like, this is the headline, da 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 da, and then do a reply to that with the link. For whatever reason, I've been told that's the way to do it. But yeah, otherwise, because X is shite. But all right, guys, appreciate all of you. Really enjoyed today's podcast. Lots of good questions. I'll see you next week. And between now and then, keep an eye out for this Road to UFC flyweight video. I'm going to go through every single flyweight on the tournament this year. I'm going to give them all a seed, basically ranking them all 1 to 8. I'm going to predict every single fight. Going to give you the lowdown on each fighter, show you their record, all that good stuff. Hopefully all that you would need to get locked into that flyweight tournament. I'll try to do another one of those videos before Road to UFC, but I originally planned to do 3, and we'll do that if I can, but now I'm starting to feel like 2 might be more realistic. So maybe I'll do another one. I'll probably focus on the featherweights. So have a great weekend. Enjoy UFC 301. Until next time.